Oh, wait, there's more.
I've been investigated by the Democrats more than Billy the Kid, Jesse James, and Al Capone
Guilty,
combined.
and also guilty.
And in all cases, I've been innocent.
No. Okay, those were all criminals that were found guilty. So his point is, okay. All right, don't yell at us for playing Trump sound bites. That would be Aaron Rupar's fault, who tweets, Trump's North Carolina rally is news in that a lunatic is not only a former president, but the presumptive 2024 GOP presidential nominee. But it's also not news in that he's out there saying pretty much the same stuff over and over. His material has barely changed over the last 4 years. Aaron Rupar joins us now. Good morning, Aaron. I just wanted to just pass the blame right to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you struggle with the same thing. People are like, oh my God, I can't stand him. I can't hear his voice. Don't give him any more press. But it's like, I knew that he would never shut them or go away. He's like the clap. But it's we have to pay attention, right? Because he may be the nominee, and he is pretty much the leader of the Republican Party.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It is kind of a strange thing. I really felt that with his rally this past weekend that they're so repetitive, right. You know? I mean, he does make news kind of in the riffs that he does or the off-script moments. But I think you're right also that you can't really turn away because it's important to know what's going on in the Republican Party. And, as you mentioned, he's a presumptive 2024 nominee, and he's out there campaigning for all these midterm candidates, including this past weekend Madison Cawthorn, and the weekend prior he was in Georgia campaigning for Herschel Walker, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was there. And so it's important for progressives to be informed about what's going on on the right. But for me, as someone who's watched pretty much all of his rallies now going back to 2016, they're extremely repetitive, and it's the same stuff about building the wall and crooked Hillary, lock her up. I mean, it's been the same stuff basically for 6 years. And that's why in the tweet that I mentioned, the years that he hasn't changed his material, I really kind of trace that back to the 2018 midterms, where, he was campaigning for Republicans in that cycle as well. But it was a lot of this stuff about how he was being stymied. He couldn't get the wall built, for instance, or it was going to be built very soon, if he could just overcome the Democrats in Congress who were blocking him. And it's just the same stuff still. So that's really striking to me. And I have a hard time getting excited to watch his rallies. Like at one time I felt obligated to do. Yeah. But at the same time, I still do pay attention to a point because, for all the reasons that you mentioned, it's just important to be plugged in. Well, with what's going on the right.
You wrote a new piece this morning, polling from a society in decline. Herschel Walker might ultimately lose to Raphael Warnock, but we really shouldn't have to sweat it. I mean, and thank you, by the way, for your beautiful piece about Eric Boehlert. But you write about his last piece about, in fact, gained 7.5 million. So I remember, Aaron, what you just said reminds me of in 2016. I really was not worried about the Hillary email stuff or the QAnon stuff. I'm like, that's crazy. Even if you hate Hillary, people really think she's a pedophile that runs a child sex ring in a pizza parlor with no basement. But we didn't pay attention, and enough people and the media was, as Eric would say, once again, no help. And between Russia and all of that disinformation, here we are, right? So, as you said, you said Boehlert's last post Monday, which we quoted from, why is the press rooting against Biden? It's a fitting testament to his skills. It's rich with example of how outlets like CNN and Washington Post trampled on last Friday's strong jobs report by framing stories about it around inflation. Why a great jobs report can't save Joe Biden, said CNN, and unspecified anxieties people have. Biden gets a strong jobs report, but sour mood still prevails, read one in the Post. He went on to connect the negative tone of that coverage with recent polling showing a plurality of Americans believe Biden has actually presided over job losses when in fact he has overseen historic gains. And you quote Eric's actual piece. Sunday's Meet the Press Roundtable featured 2 segments with assembled pundits. One featured on how immigration might be a problem for Democrats in the midterm. The other on how Trump might be a problem for Democrats in the midterms. As usual, Biden's historic economic record was ignored. So that's why we have to pay attention, right?
Yeah, totally agree with you there. And yeah, it was really kind of surreal because I wrote a newsletter for last Tuesday, it would have been. And, so I kind of prepped it over the weekend, and I really kind of drew significantly from Eric's piece and cited him and, quoted part of what turned out to be his last post. And so, as I was kind of processing the news of his passing on Monday, I decided just to kind of change gears and do a little bit of a tribute to him rather than, something that was related to his work, but didn't really kind of highlight the loss that is his passing, and that, not having his voice to kind of hold, the thing that I really appreciated so much about Eric's work lately has been how effective he was in holding, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, mainstream outlets accountable as well, because, I spent a lot of time watching right-wing media, watching Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, that sort of stuff. And certainly, I pay attention to MSNBC and CNN as well. But, I think that Eric's voice was so important in that respect, because I think for, progressive media critics, or just people who consume the news generally, it can be tough to criticize MSNBC or CNN, especially working as a professional journalist, because those could be your potential colleagues. You might work with those people. I mean, Eric was going on MSNBC pretty regularly, and so it can be challenging, or you can feel kind of a reluctance to damage those relationships. And so I really turned to his writing a lot for insight into how those outlets were falling short and are falling short. The Herschel Walker stuff, I think, is a little bit different, just because I think, Georgia is kind of a unique case where I think Warnock would have a tough time this year, and arguably he would have a tougher time against kind of a generic Republican than he would against someone like Herschel Walker, who has a lot of name recognition and celebrity. And, but also, Walker has some very obvious weaknesses, including a complete inability to engage with policy and all of his personal baggage. And so you can kind of look at it, or it's very close, but, during a general campaign, some of Walker's weaknesses will probably become more obvious, and that could help Warnock. But I think, as I mentioned in the thing that I wrote today, one of the problems with that theory is that we've had a year almost now of reports about, the scandalous nature of Walker's past, and, his exaggerations about his business, lying about his educational background. And it hasn't been enough to really damage him. And so that's kind of the parallel I draw in the piece, is that, and that way it reminds me a lot of Trump, where it was like, no matter what scandal was unearthed surrounding Trump or that he was involved in, it didn't really seem to damage his standing. And I think we see some of that same dynamic with Herschel Walker.
Yeah. And where is it? In Pennsylvania, right? Isn't the domestic abuser guy there that Trump initially endorsed?
Yes.
And now it's like, okay, well, TV guy that's famous for being Dr. Oz. I mean, that's all they got. Like, I don't know, famous guy, or it doesn't matter if he's a misogynist or whatever. I mean, it really is like a pie wheel of awful, just all of, to me, most of their candidates. But anyway, I wanted to say we linked to your piece because it is beautiful. Just rest in peace, Eric Boehlert. His voice will be missed. Reflections on one of the foremost progressive media critics of our time, gone suddenly and too soon. I think that's the suddenness of it was anyway. But I just wanted you to talk a little bit more. You said I didn't know Boehlert personally beyond occasionally exchanging DMs with him in recent years, but he was among a leading group of progressive writers I've been reading online for what feels like forever. Yeah. He sent me a nice note wishing me well when I started with Vox in 2018. Coming from someone I've been reading for years, it meant a lot to me. I mean, that to me, Aaron, crystallized who Eric was. A listener called and told a great story that I love. Ran into him. She lived there and ran into him and said, "Oh my God, Stephanie Miller loves you so much," which I'm really glad she said to him. I know I said it to him every week, but he immediately said, "Oh, she's so funny." And I thought that sums up Eric, right? Like just that he wrote to you. I mean, there's so many stories of people that young writers like you that he's reached out to. That was Eric. He would always deflect it back to you. He never made it about himself. It always became like, oh, he'd laugh, but then say, isn't this guy so great, or this girl, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we exchanged DMs over the years, maybe 2-3 a year kind of thing, not very regularly, but that was one that kind of really stuck with me, because whenever you change jobs like that, it's good to have validation that you're kind of succeeding, or having that other people recognize that you're having success or doing good work kind of thing. And so, that was really cool. And then over the years, we would kind of banter about, he would flag certain things that he saw, whether it was on TV or in print, to me, and kind of vice versa. And so we had that sort of dialogue. And then, what I also mentioned in the tribute that I wrote to him is that when I was thinking of going solo last fall, his publication to me was kind of a strong example of what I hope mine could become. Mm-hmm. Where I think that, he just did a great job with his newsletter, having, kind of like a substantial section toward the top, but like kind of, more fun sections towards the bottom. And he really had a strong voice. And so, yeah, it's still kind of shocking to process that that he'll no longer be writing and publishing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
But
huge loss, but yeah, I mean, that's just, it's one of those
we
small things in life. The nice note that he sent me, back in 2018
yeah.
when I was switching jobs, that probably for him was just kind of, I mean, in my career, it really did mean a lot. So those
Almost,
are the things that kind of stick
yeah,
with you.
Aaron, almost all our regulars have told a similar story about Eric
Yeah.
reaching out to them and how much it meant to them. And I thought you said it best about why he is so unique and irreplaceable. You said he had an impressive ability to metabolize political coverage across a range of mediums, including print and TV, then synthesize it in columns featuring lots of specific examples to flesh out his often provocative arguments. And then the other thing you said about I appreciate his refusal to pull punches, his willingness to call at anyone and everyone, including MSNBC's and CNN's, something left of center media watchers sometimes shy away from because they don't want to damage professional relationships. He was fearless. That was the other thing. Just fearless and incisive. And you're right, no one else is doing exactly what he did. And so I just thought, we linked to this, by the way. I thought it was a beautiful tribute. You just said his voice and insight, which had been a constant presence in my corner of the internet for well over a decade, will be sorely missed. Perhaps most importantly, Bohlert's sudden passing is a reminder that none of us should take tomorrow for granted. By all his appearances, his Monday was a normal day of tweeting, writing, radio hits. Yep, on my show. And then he was gone. It's tragic, and my heart goes out to his wife, children, family, friends, and fans. And yeah, I mean, it's just... how many people said that, right? About tomorrow is not promised to any of us. I mean, I thought I was like, stop crying for a minute, and then someone would post a screenshot of us on Monday, saying our usual goodbye and I love you and talk to you next week. And boy, I hope that's something everybody takes to heart,
Right. No, for sure. And yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys along with like Josh Marshall and, I hate to even mention his name in this context these days, but Glenn Greenwald, who I just felt like I'd been reading like forever on the internet, even though it's really only been maybe 10, 12 years kind of thing. That part of it, I mean, there's certain writers that are just kind of part of your media metabolism for years and years and years. And he was one of them for me. And I think especially, in this day and age where, it's important to have voices that are holding kind of mainstream media and then, media that's kind of center left accountable as well. And there's not that many people operating in that space.
Yeah.
It's something that, I strive to do more of, but I'm just so immersed on the stuff in the right that it can be hard to find time sometimes
well,
to watch
listen,
everything.
We used to say we watch Fox so you don't have to, but I'm too old and brittle for that now. I can't take it. So you watch Fox so we don't have to now. And
I think actually
it.
Asen watches Fox. I mean, I'm amazed by how much he's on there watching pretty much every show. Especially now that I have a kid, evenings can be challenging. I end up watching a lot more Hannity these days because we usually get Mia to bed during Tucker Carlson's show. So then once she's in bed, I can turn on Fox, and that's typically during Hannity's show. For better or worse.